So what are the parts that we're building in the young brain? Well, we have two aspects of reading, and I'm going to show you a picture of this in a moment. But one aspect of learning to read proficiently is to be able to comprehend oral language, and that involves learning what words mean. So vocabulary, it means we have to understand the sentences that are in text that we listen to, also referred to as grammar or syntax. We also have to build our background knowledge about the world in order to understand what we're reading or what's being read to us. And then we also have to know how print works. So I've highlighted that in the upper section of this slide because I'm going to focus on what we call concepts of print or print knowledge today. At the bottom of this slide, you're going to see word recognition knowledge. That's the other component, if you know the simple view of reading, the other core component, which is word recognition. That involves phonological awareness, recognizing letters, and then letter sound knowledge. And if you know and are familiar with Hollis Scarborough's rope, I've taken a little bit of liberty to adapt this for today's presentation. So the top of the rope has to do with oral language comprehension. That is how well we understand what we hear, right? And those are the things that I just spoke about, right? And I've highlighted knowledge about books because I want to talk about how important that is when we're developing children's early writing skills. At the bottom of the rope, you see word recognition. I'm going to highlight and talk about all three of those things in the context of developing children's early writing skills. At the top, you see we're learning about books and language up here, and down here, our whole role, the whole point of what we're doing for phonological awareness and these other skills is we want kids to develop and discover the alphabetic principle, which is really, really important to be able to be ready to learn to read. So I want to talk about two different approaches that are used in early classrooms, in pre-K and K classrooms, and even in first grade. One is speech to print, a speech to print approach, and the other is print to speech. So since the brain is wired for language, a speech to print is really preferable to a print to speech approach, and I'm going to break that down in a minute. And what does that mean? In a speech to print approach, we're listening to the sounds, and I'm pointing to the left hemisphere of my brain because this is where we're processing language, and I'm helping children to attend to those sounds because those sounds are at the heart of understanding words in an alphabetic language. So in a print to speech approach, which is probably the most commonly used approach in pre-K and K classrooms, we're going to have children look at a word, and here I have the word fish, and we might say to the child, what letter does the word fish begin with? And the child will say F. And then we might go from the print to the speech by saying, what sound does the letter F make? And what sound does the letter F make, everyone? Right? And what you're doing here is you're kind of teaching about the decoding principle. So I have to look at F. I have to know F says F. I have to look at I. In this case, it says I. And I have to deconstruct this word letter by letter and sound by sound. In contrast to print to speech, we believe, and the research is pretty compelling about this, that we should begin with speech and go from speech to print. It seems like a subtle distinction, but it's an important one. So in this case, I'm not looking at print at all yet. I want the child to look at a picture of a fish, and I want them to say fish. So everyone say fish, fish. What sound does the word fish begin with? That's good. And I want you to be paying attention to the sound that you're feeling your mouth make when you say fish. And then after you've isolated that sound, you then can say to the child, do you know what letter makes the sound? And then they would say F. This is important because children are already, they're already aware of sounds and words. They've been hearing words since they were born. And as they get more proficient and they start to bring language onto the scene, they're starting to hear the sounds and pay attention to the sounds in words. So we are going to marry writing and reading, because writing and reading go hand in glove, right? Writing helps children learn that letters stand for sounds and that print has meaning. And this says, in case you want to know, the invented writing here is, this is Ellie Lab School Classroom. As I mentioned at the beginning of this presentation, I've called this early writing, but researchers refer to this as invented writing. They also call it developmental spelling. So you're going to hear different terms used for the same thing. And I like the term invented writing or invented spelling, because we're actually helping the children think about, you know, what are they hearing, and they're going to invent their own writing based on what they hear. Now, there are three things that I want to emphasize today that are required to invent a spelling. First, children have to have phonemic awareness, and I'm going to talk more about that, because you have to be able to identify the sounds and then sequence them in a specific order. The second thing they have to know about is print concepts. They have to know how print works. And third, they have to know letter knowledge and letter sound knowledge. So today I'm going to introduce you to these 5 activities. As I mentioned before, they're going to be in your handout packet, so you're going to see each of these 5 activities, but I'm going to walk you through them in the context of these 3 important concepts that will contribute to your children's early writing. And the first concept I'm going to talk about is phonological awareness. This is a rocket ship that shows the levels of phonological awareness, beginning with the easiest level, level 3, where you're hearing syllables and rhymes. You can know and understand sentences can be taken apart one word at a time, right? And the phonological awareness that is key to being able to learn to read develops sequentially. So we want to be differentiating instruction based on that. The easiest level is this level 3, where kids are starting to pay attention to words that rhyme. They're starting to pay attention to words having syllables. And there are 3 aspects to this syllable awareness. One is being able to segment. And you're going to see a video clip of little Tate in a minute, clapping syllables. Another is to blend the syllables. So if I say elephant, what's my word? Elephant. And the third, actually, sorry, this should be a number 3 here. Number 3 is manipulation, where I can actually delete a syllable. And you'll see what that looks like with Tate here.
Island.
Oh, is that your last name? Good. All right. Tate, what if I say the word, oh, what's this?
Popcorn.
Did you clap popcorn?
Popcorn.
Good. So how many claps in popcorn?
2.
2. Good. You know what this one is?
Chicken.
Chicken, or you could call it a rooster.
Yeah.
All right. Can you clap it?
Rooster.
How many claps in rooster?
3.
Do it again.
Rooster.
Good. How many claps? How many?
2.
2. Good job. Remember the game that we played the other day, Tate, and I would say a word like playground. Say playground.
Playground.
Now say playground, but don't say play.
Ground.
Good. Say fireplace.
Fireplace.
Now say fireplace, but don't say place.
Fire.
Good job.
I.
Okay, so you notice with little Tate, we were at that level 3. She's 3 years old, so this is a perfect place to start building phonological awareness. She's clapping the syllables and words, and that last level where she had to manipulate, she had to hear the word fireplace, and then she had to delete one of the syllables and tell me what syllable was left. Easier to do that in a compound word like fireplace, popcorn, etc. Once kids have mastered level 3, they go to level 2 where they're starting to break the word up by sounds. And so at this level, we're going to isolate first the beginning sound, then the final sound, and then the medial sound. So I wouldn't be able to do any of this work without my box of Lakeshore Photo Library cards. Highly recommend these because the pictures are really easy for kids to look at, and you know, they're great visuals for them. So for example, if I wanted to do the final sound after they've mastered initial sound, I have the word nuts and I have the word goose, and I'm really going to elongate that final sound, goose. That's called a continuant sound because I can stretch it out. Once kids can master initial, then they go to final, then the last sound they can actually start to hear is the medial sound. So I have bike, dice, and 5, where I've got that long I. It's a little easier to hear in those words.
So Margie, I have 2 questions. Is it okay
Sure.
if I interrupt?
No, not
one is about the left to right writing. So I don't know if you're going to talk a little bit more about this.
I am
moving
going to talk
forward.
about that.
So if you are, that's fine. But this person said she has 2 left-handed children who are mostly academically advanced, but both started writing in mirror, right to left. Is this normal for left-handedness? So that's the first question.
Okay, and so I would say, yes, I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. Tate is a lefty, and Tate definitely is, you know, having trouble with letter formation, but that's very common up until 6 or 7 years old. Children will routinely reverse their letters, and as a lefty, they do often write their names from right to left versus left to right. So not to worry.
Okay, thank you. I am a lefty too and had trouble with that. So I can now write left to right, so I'm all good.
Yeah. It's all good. But it's a really good question.
Yeah, another good question. How can you best teach syllables via Zoom? With the delay, it seems to be difficult, but the video clip shown makes it look easy. So do you have any tricks for that?
I think it's, you know, definitely using the pictures like you saw me holding up popcorn and having them clap and getting them to do the clapping. Certainly we have something we do called body say it and move it when they're ready to, you know, segment the words, and they can stand up and really get involved more kinesthetically using multisensory modality. So, you know, I think it's just however you can engage them to do it.
Okay. And then I have one more question that I'm not sure if I fully understand, but should use Elecom boxes where the child will move an object into each box as they say the word, syllable, or sound. Where is the box of vocabulary cards from?
Okay, so the Elkonen, I'm going to show a picture of that in a minute, and this photo library box is Lakeshore.
Okay, great, thank you.
I was going to play a video of doing a final sound isolation, but unfortunately it's hard to hear the video. So I just want to show you that you can go into our Literacy House website, and we do have, can you see this okay?
Yes, it's a little small, but we can see.
It's a little small. So at the bottom of our website, we have a YouTube channel, and here's a number of videos on how to do phonemic and phonological awareness. This is the video, like I said, it's too hard to hear, so I'm not going to play it, but you can go back and see a really nice video clip of a lesson that you'll be able to hear better when it's not, when I'm not using Zoom. So just so you know where to find that. All right, I'm going to keep going or I'll run out of time. The point of all this work with phonological awareness is when you combine this phonological awareness, which is all done right through sound recognition, no letters involved, but you do eventually want to teach kids the connection between the sounds and the letters, and that's where the alphabetic principle comes in. The alphabetic principle is this understanding that sounds are represented by letters, and it is the bridge to literacy. And we can really jumpstart and help kids with invented writing, or rather the alphabetic principle, by doing a lot of invented writing in the classroom. So this is a child's invented writing about the mayor of Norwalk, and you'll see a lot of examples of invented writing throughout the presentation. So now that we've talked about phonological awareness, the second component of invented writing or invented spelling is understanding print and how print works. And certainly we know the importance of exposing children to books from the time they're young. Babies enjoy being read to, and once they can start handling books, little Riley is 6 months old here. She loves books, and she really can attend and start to turn the pages. And this is a central goal. This print awareness, this book knowledge is a central goal during the preschool and kindergarten years. Because if a child comes into your classroom with limited exposure to print, that is going to impact their ability to start to take advantage of that alphabetic principle and be prepared to learn to read. So we want to make up for that, that lack of exposure as much as we can when we work with these children. And so this slide shows a number of concepts associated with print awareness and a number of skills. I'm not going to spend too much time on this because I do think teachers learn a lot about this in their training, but just note that there are important concepts and skills associated with concepts of print awareness. And you do have a 3-page handout that is a really nice, if you don't already have one, an assessment that you can use to pinpoint what your students' concepts of print are. One of the ways that we can help our students understand this concept of print and how print works and mapping print and sound together is to do something called synchronized reading. This is another handout that you're going to get. It's an activity that you can do with little kids, and I'm going to show you Tate, again, who's 3, who has not figured out the alphabetic principle yet, and her older sister, Reese, who has. And just to show you the difference between the two developmentally. So you take a simple poem, one that a child has memorized, like 1, 2, buckle my shoe. It's something they, like I said, have already memorized. And then you're going to give them a pointer and see if they can point to the words left to right, doing the return sweep. Do they have this one-to-one awareness, etc.? And are they paying attention to the words in the poem? So this first clip is Tate, again, who does not quite have it, but she's still trying.
Ready, Tate? Okay. Here we go. Start right here.
What's this called?
1, 2, buckle my shoe.
Okay.
All right. Ready, start right here.
1, 2, buckle my shoe. 6,
3,
3, 4, shut the door. 6, 7, pick up sticks. 7, 8,
lay.
lay them straight. 9, 10, there's a big fat head. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
Okay, so you saw little Tate, who, like I said, starting to understand, you know, you go from left to right and you go down a page to read because she's been read to a lot, but she can't read. Here's her sister who is learning how to read, and you can see the difference in where they are developmentally with this.
1, 2, back on 6, 3, 4, 5, 5, 6, take up steps, 7, 8, lay down straight.
In the interest of time, I'm going to move on, but you can see the difference, right? And now in this next one, I'm going to take her to another level and see if she can actually order the sentences, because she may have just memorized. And so I want to see, is she actually being able, is she actually reading the words? So you can see her in this clip arranging the sentences.
1, 2, back on 6.
Okay, and again, in the interest of time, I'll run out of time, but you can see as she's really reading each word, she might not know each word in isolation, but in the context of the poem, she can do that. And then this last fun activity is to take a sentence and cut it up into individual words, and then have the student take those words and see if they can put them in proper order. Okay, so I hope that makes sense. This whole idea of synchronized reading, as I said, gives them practice reading one-to-one correspondence, and it really does actually seem to propel them forward in understanding how to put those words together. This whole idea of the alphabetic principle is so very important, and adults, the teachers, the parents, if you're a parent at home, you can model how print works through playful activities, having children explore how to use print, letting children construct their own knowledge of writing, and giving them practice with how to form letters in their names. And you see this clip, the child is putting together, you know, H, his name is Henry, just with popsicle sticks first. And he can see how those lines are, you know, are connected, and before he can actually, with his fine motor skills, make the letters. So now the third aspect of invented writing or invented spelling is letter sound knowledge. And certainly as preschool teachers, kindergarten teachers, you know how important it is to reinforce the proper letter sound knowledge. And I say proper because I've seen lots of keywords displayed in classrooms, and not all the key pictures are the best pictures. For example, X is a tough letter sound correspondence because the sound for X is actually X. It's hard probably to hear that on Zoom, but you're actually putting two sounds together, the sound for K and the sound for S, and you're saying it fast. X. And yet many alphabets have the word xylophone as the key word for X, or X-ray, right? The best key picture for X would be a box or a fox, where the sound is at the end of the word. So your handout will have, another handout that you have is suggestions for your key pictures. Here you see echo for E. That's the short sound of E. So you want to make sure you're teaching the proper sounds. And why is that so important? Well, first, we want our kids to be able to recognize the names of the letters. And when they can recognize the letter's name and they know it and they can retrieve it and automatically tell you what it is, they're going to have more capacity for remembering words and processing words, right? And this knowledge, this letter knowledge, is really sometimes a key and a clue to how much exposure they've had. Having said that, I will tell you that one of my children had lots of exposure to letters, and she still could not retain them. Turns out that she had a pretty significant language learning disability, but at age 3, as much exposure as she received, that was very hard for her to retain, not just the letters' names, but also the sound letter correspondences. So pay attention to that. Letter knowledge is one of the best predictors of first grade reading. It's success. Certainly children in pre-K and K knowing those letters. And this includes recognizing letters in both upper and lowercase forms. I don't know how well you can see this picture, but this is Peter. And Peter's name is written in all lower uppercase, and then above it, there's uppercase. And we know that the letters may look exactly the same as upper and lowercase, or they may look completely different. So you do want your children to practice matching the upper and lowercase letters. And another little fun thing to do for getting kids to recognize the letter is something called the alphabet chant. And you'll see this on a handout where I have the upper and the lowercase letters. Rather than have the kids sing the alphabet song, where they think LMNOP is 1 or 2 letters, we can have them chant A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P, Q, R, S, T, U, V, W, X, Y, Z. So that chant is going to preclude them from stringing those letters together and not understanding them as individual letters with their own name. Letter names are a window into letter sounds. Many letters have the sound in them. So this is the letter B. If you say the name of the letter B, B, it starts with the sound B. Okay, not all though. W is a tricky one. So if you listen to the sound you hear at the beginning of W, D, you actually hear a D, a D sound. So it can be confusing, and the more kids practice this, the better. Lori Cousseau from Green River Literacy did a wonderful presentation a few weeks ago, and I think you can access this on the CoLab website Suzanne will share with you. This was Feeding the Alphabet Monster, or the Alpha Monster. So she did such a great job of sharing some wonderful activities for letter recognition and letter sound knowledge. Another thing that we do with little kids, 4, 5, 6-year-old kids, is sing the vowel song. So the vowel song goes like this. This is another handout that you'll receive. But A makes 2 sounds, A makes 2 sounds, A and A, A and A. A as an acorn, as an apple, A and A. Kids will sing this song when they're 3, 4, 5 years old, and they're not necessarily sure what they're singing, except that the other day, Tate sings this all the time to me, and the other day she said to me, Grandma, that's A like an acorn. So she's been singing the song, and all of a sudden it's starting to make sense that these words have these very important letters in them called vowels. And that's something you're going to tell them and teach them more about as they learn more about the language. So now that I've given you a background on writing and the 3 essential elements to working on invented writing with students, I just want to talk to you for a few minutes about typical writing development and how it progresses, because there are actually 5 stages of writing development that we can look at and understand more about how children's writing is going to develop. Stage 1 is referred to as pre-alphabetic. So you can see in this picture that the child is scribbling, and that's the first part of that pre-alphabetic stage, typically occurring between the ages of 2 and 5. They just scribble and they think they're writing, and that's awesome. And they say, I'm writing a letter to you, Mommy. I'm writing a letter to my teacher. Once they have grown or developed beyond the scribbling stage, they're going to do mock letters that you see down here. Okay, they don't represent anything, but they can understand now that they have to make these spaces between their scribbles. And then step 3 in the pre-alphabetic stage is they're going to make random letter strings. They don't represent any sounds yet. This is, again, the pre-alphabetic stage. And you can see here are some mock letters. Here are some random letter strings and some more random letter strings. And this is an important first step in children's invented writing because they're seeing their peers or their teachers writing and they want to model that. They want to emulate and be a writer. And we can help students start to get better at taking those random letters or those random lines and help them construct letters by cutting out circles and sticks and having them put together to form the letters. This is Letterman. So it starts with just putting shapes together and understanding those shapes ultimately are going to be combined to make letters. In stage 2, we call this the semiphonetic stage because they're starting to use the letters that they see around them. And they're beginning to become aware of that relationship, as I mentioned before, between the letters of the alphabet and the sounds that they're making or that they're hearing themselves make. This word, anybody want to try to guess this one? This is flower, and this is vegetable, and this is hard. So you can see, a lot of the students' attention to the sounds, they're using mostly uppercase letters. I will tell you that uppercase letters are a good place to start because they're easier to identify and to actually form.
Margie, can I ask a question from
Absolutely.
participants? Somebody's asking, at what age do you advise starting formal letter recognition instruction?
So formal letter recognition instruction, I mean, honestly, I think you start, let me just say where I would start informal letter recognition instruction, really from day 1. So surrounding kids with print. And then when they start to notice print, and usually it's in their name, that's where you begin. You would say, this is your name, and I'm going to write your name for you. And depending on how long it is, start with a few letters and then build up. But that's really, I would say around 3 years old is probably a good time to start really intentionally working on letters and letter recognition, starting with their name. Again, hand in glove with teaching the letters and the recognition of letters is the writing of the letters. Keeping in mind that 3-year-olds do not have good fine motor coordination, so you can only go so far with a 3-year-old, and I can tell you that firsthand now working with Tate for the last 2 months. She wants to write and she tries to hold her pencil correctly, but she still doesn't have that good fine motor coordination, so you're going to want to do a lot of this gross motor. But you do want to encourage your students to write. You accept all their attempts. The important thing is for them not to develop fear of being wrong. And this is a challenge for getting your kids to invent writing and use invented spelling, because many of them will say, no, I don't, tell me how to spell it. I want to know how to spell it. And it's hard to break that habit and say, you don't have to know how to spell it. Let's just go by what you're hearing. And this little boy, this is reusable bags is what this child wrote. Again, you can see some of the sounds that he's been working on, and he's got he's really working toward putting those letters down in print. At the phonetic stage, which usually occurs in kindergarten or 1st grade, but this is actually a 4-year-old who's done a lot of invented writing, and you might be able to see what this child, whose name is Lucas, is writing here. I am a TV Anybody know what that word is? Astronaut. So it's not exactly phonetic. He's left out a couple of sounds, but he really worked hard to invent this writing. And then stage 4 and 5 are your transitional and conventional writing stages. This, somebody asked about the Elkonin boxes. This is an Elkonin box. This is a picture of jam. So with an Elkonin box, you have the number of boxes that you would be hearing in a word, and the student puts one sound per box. This is a great way to help students with speech to print. So they hear jam, and we usually have them put a chip in each box first for every sound they hear, and then they represent each of those sounds with a letter. Now, let me talk a little bit about handwriting instruction, because I know many of you are, watching this webinar and wondering about that. Let me first say that it's really important. If you are pre-K teachers on this Zoom webinar, please, please, please work with your kids on letter formation. It starts in pre-K. Again, their fine motor coordination isn't great, but you can have fun with finger paint, with shaving cream. Start with just getting them to make circles and lines, both vertical and horizontal. Then you're going to do diagonal lines, and they can just practice that. Encouraging them to write their letters from top to bottom. And you have a handout that you see on this slide. It's a several page handout that has stroke descriptions for both upper and lowercase letters. I can't emphasize this enough. If I have K and 1 teachers on my call here, I'm sure you would validate what I'm saying. It's really hard to change a child's letter formation and grip in kindergarten, first grade, and beyond. So in pre-K, in developmentally appropriate ways, teaching them proper letter formation is really, really important. Having the kids do them, when it says here vertically, it means standing up on a whiteboard, right? And really doing those gross motor formations. And around about 4 or 5, you can actually start working on proper pencil grip. Here's another one of Lori's wonderful slides, and this one is, tactile tracers, so getting kids to trace the letters, and there's some validity to doing that. I would not have them do rows and rows of, tracing and letter formation, but to do a little bit of it to develop that automaticity of formation is really important. What do young children do? Well, what they really are doing is learning about writing as a complex process, right? We know as adults, writing is probably the most complex thing we can do. And most teachers, when I ask them about writing them for themselves personally, most of them will say, I don't feel like I'm a great writer. I feel like I struggle with writing. And if you dig into that a little bit, especially for teachers who are in their late 20s, 30s, they may not have, we kind of threw writing out about 20 years ago. And we threw it out when technology came on the scene because we felt like we had to teach our kids keyboarding and so forth and so on. We do. No question about that, but it's not mutually exclusive. Just because we have to teach our kids to be savvy with technology does not mean we should ignore writing. And there's a lot of research to support this. So what young children are doing is they're playing with writing, they're moving from imitating patterns to then creating them. They begin to pay attention to the letters and how they're formed, and that's going to help them again with their writing.
Margie, can I ask a couple of questions from the audience?
You bet.
So the first one is, should pre-K kids use markers or pencils to write?
I always get this question, and it almost doesn't matter. I think whatever they like to use. I do think that with the letter formation, or when you're starting to pay attention to the pencil grip, having the fat pencils helps, but you could use markers too. Pencils, you just get a little more resistance with. So I do think that you want to use different, what's the right word, Suzanne? You're the artist, not medium, but
utensils or medium.
there you go. Thank you. There you go. So do use all of it, but it doesn't really matter. Eventually pencils are good because that's what you're going to ultimately want them to use.
Right. And then the second question along similar lines is, how do you feel about handwriting without tears and their flip crayons and small pencils for grip?
I think it's a solid program. I've not heard, I've not taught it, so I always qualify my responses by saying I've not used it to teach, but I know lots and lots of teachers who have, and I do know there is research behind it.
Great. And another question popped in. Should you correct the grip of a 3-year-old?
No.
Okay.
No.
Easy.
I've tried, and like I said, with Tate, she has trouble, and I don't think you want to do too much correcting at 3. At late 4, 5, yes. Okay. Yeah, because by then it's hard to change it. Right. Or after that, it's hard to change it, I should say.
Super. Thank you. That's all the questions. I know you don't have a whole lot of time left, so
No, but I'm glad to hear the questions, and I'm happy to take some more as time allows. This is another handout. I think it's the last in the group that I've shared with you. This is called See It, Say It, Write It. And See It, Say It, Write It. I'm going to show you a quick video clip of this too. A version of this, modified, is basically seeing the letter and then saying the name of it, S, sun, and then writing it. So it's a multi-sensory. Whenever you can get the student to name the letter, say the sound, give the keyword, that keyword, and I tell the kids this all the time, the keyword does what a key does to a door. What does a key do? It unlocks a door. The keyword unlocks the sound. So again, it's very important that you choose those keywords carefully and wisely, which is why I gave you a handout for that. Here's just a very quick video clip of explicit letter writing instruction.
Like, Caitlin, do you have one of these in your name? A C in your name. C says, can you make a C? What letter is this? What sound does it make? 1 point. Nice job. Do you want to leave your C there? All right, let's write another letter. How about this letter?
So you know what's hard about English, and you'll all have encountered this as you've worked with kids, is that example of C, right? C is a letter that has 2 sounds. In that little girl's name, C said K, right? And C is tricky because C sounds like it should say S, right? Remember I said that sometimes the names of the letters will give clues to the sounds of those letters. And so it works more or less. As teachers, just be aware, and if I had more time in this workshop, when I do the invented writing workshop and I have a couple of hours to do it, I actually have teachers sorting the letters by how they sound. It gives you some real insight into how children are using the names of the letters to help them figure out how to invent spellings for words. What I hope you come away with today is why it's really valuable to help children with this whole idea of using invented or developmental spelling, because it's rule-based, meaning they're paying attention to sounds, super important. Going back to one of the fundamental things we talked about earlier, speech to print is by and large a really important way to go for early learners, reinforcing this whole idea that these sounds that have been coming out of my mouth actually are represented by these random things called letters. And the letters are random. There's no reason why this is a C and this is a G, right? The Phoenicians invented the alphabet thousands of years ago because it was a more efficient way of us communicating as a species, right? But other parts of the world, Chinese, don't use letters for their words and to represent their ideas. They have characters. So there's it's a different system, but it's important for you as teachers to know that it's a very rule-based system, again, based on the alphabet. So when children start to hear this, like I said, this is the C. When they hear the word C, I went to see my friend, they may just write the letter C to represent the word see, right? For H, they're going to hear in the letter name H, they actually hear ch, ch, if they're really paying attention. So if they were to spell the word chew, they might write an H, and you might look at it and say, what is that? Actually, they're paying attention to the letter's name. And then you have the W, as I mentioned before, that actually sounds like it does start with the D, and the Y, right? When you say the letter's name Y, the letter name Y, your mouth is going like this, woo, woo. So a child might write a Y when they're writing the word will, right? This says walking feet. So again, another invented spelling to share with you. Why is invented writing important? So as we're coming up on the hour, I want to, just leave you with a couple of important thoughts. It's really important to remember that in the early years, actually children write before they read. And when a young child asks us what she's written, if she's written something down, we own the power of the meaning of what that child wrote. Let's flip it. Let's ask her what she wrote and ask her to read the scribbles. Then she owns the meaning. And she understands that writing is all about communicating, right? Your ideas, your thoughts, whatever it may be. And that's important. It's a powerful tool that helps children develop their early literacy skills. The benefits are many, and I want to just reiterate a few. Their attitudinal readiness for reading is, you're not going to believe how it changes when they start to do this writing. And linguistically, they're ready for reading. What does that mean? Because we've been focusing on the sounds, the alphabetic principle, the speech to print aspect of reading and writing that is incredibly important for them to have foundational knowledge about. Not only that, but it promotes their interest in learning about what words say and how they're spelled, which is really important, because some of us might say, well, English is a crazy language. There's no rhyme or reason. There's no logic. Guess what? There's a whole lot of logic. But we as teachers need to understand what that is. This is really important. If you work with children who come from poverty or disadvantage, or they're English learners, they're going to have fewer experiences with letters and speech to print and phonological awareness and nursery rhymes and being read to. So you can actually close a gap by doing this work. And last but not least, as I mentioned, it does help develop this phonemic awareness and this relationship between spoken and written words that is absolutely integral to learning English, learning how to read and speak English. And that is the end. It's 2 o'clock on the button. I don't know if we have any time for questions, Suzanne, but I thoroughly enjoyed talking to all of you this afternoon and hope that you've gotten some good ideas today.
That was amazing timing, Margie, right on the dot. We do have a few questions in the chat box that we didn't get to, so I'm wondering if you have a few minutes, if anybody wants to hold on, and we can go over those questions.
I'm happy to hang for a few minutes. Of course, people can drop off if they need to, but yes, I'm more than happy to stay on for a little bit.
So I have somebody who asked, should pre-K teachers work on gross and fine motor skill development for pencil grip and know the stages of grip development?
I think it's helpful to know the stages of grip development. As I said before, it's not, it's not an expectation that a 3-year-old would have proper grip because of their fine motor skills, but certainly knowing what is expected and what can be expected is helpful, just so you know sort of how to take a child through that developmental progression.
Right. So thank you. The next question is, somebody wanted to know how old the child was who wrote about the reusable bag.
He was 4.
Okay. So I
Yep.
misquoted. I thought he was 3, but and then I thought that's kind of young to be able to do that. So.
Yes, he's 4. Definitely. Probably mid 4.
So somebody here asked about rhyming. They learned that rhyming was the best predictor of learning how to read before letter recognition, especially in the early years, and just wanted to know what you thought about that.
So rhyme recognition is definitely I don't know if it's as predictive as phonemic awareness is. I'm sure it isn't, but it certainly is indicative of a student's ability to process that phonological information that I mentioned. So it's a red flag if a child persists in having difficulty recognizing and producing rhyme. It's probably a good indicator that they will have difficulty with phonemic awareness. Phonemic awareness is really the big deal when it comes to reading and spelling and writing, etc. But again, it's a red flag. So if a 3-year-old has trouble with rhyme, then you just want to keep an eye on that child.
Yeah. Okay, great. And then the last question is, what do you think of letter of the week curricula?
I don't like it. I'll be right up front with that. I don't really like it because, again, it's kind of that print to speech approach where you're starting with a letter and you're asking the students to memorize and learn the letter sound correspondences. And it's usually going in alphabetical order. And what I found is that W, X, Y, and Z get kind of short shrift. And they tend to be less frequently used letters anyway. So I feel like there's a good scope and sequence for introducing letters and letter sound correspondences. Usually it's by frequency, which letters and sounds are you going to see, and also by production. So we start with, oftentimes, with the continuous sounds that are easier for children to produce, like the and the s, right? And if anybody wants to email me, I can send them a sequence that we think is good for introducing that.
Okay, 2 more questions popped up if you still have a few more minutes.
Sure.
This person is saying that they've been told by kindergarten teachers to model the child's name in upper and lowercase letters and wants to know if that's right.
I think it's a great thing to do. I think, as I mentioned before, uppercase letters are easier to form and they're easier to recognize because they're more distinguishable from one another. Whereas you have B and you have P and you have D and you have Q, right? That you just turn them one way or the other as a lowercase letter and it's a different letter. So it's important, as I mentioned earlier, for kids to be able to match the upper and lowercase letters, right? And ultimately to be able to write in upper and lowercase. In pre-K, by 4 into 5, you want kids to learn how to recognize and form those lowercase letters because that's what they're going to see in print when they start to read. So they definitely need to recognize the lowercase too. So that's a perfectly appropriate thing to practice.
Super. This last question I think is one that is going to be a little difficult to answer. But why is there so much disagreement still on what is the best way to teach reading and writing? I used to work at a school our educational consultant tried drilling into us that print to speech was the right way, though I know you're right.
Oh, thank you. Why is it? I think it's just, you know, that old adage, old habits die hard. I think when you've been immersed in doing something a certain way and you feel comfortable doing it that way and you feel like you've had success with it, why change something that's working? And the reason that you would change it is because there's a lot of compelling research to say, well, let me think about this and then try it and see how it works related or compared to what you did before. And I think what you're going to find is you're going to have more success. Everything I presented today is really based on a substantive body of research knowledge. So I feel confident. I hope you can go out and try some of these things in your classrooms or in your homes, working with your kids at home now.
Well, I want to say thank you to everybody for all of the positive comments, and I hope that you enjoyed it and you all find it useful and can use it with your students.